Hello, my name's Kristina Carpenter and I am the Head of Creative Arts at Outwood Academy Adwick, which is a school that is part of the Outwood Academy's Trust. We've been a Musical Futures Champion School now for just over a year, and I'm here today to talk to you about how you might develop a Musical Futures pedagogy in a classroom with the support of your senior leadership team. I'm going to talk you through this using my journey, and hopefully by using my journey I can give you some examples of real life scenarios that might relate to some of your experiences. I'm also going to give you some top tips, and within my top tips I'm going to give some examples of where I've taken the department and other things that I've done, again with senior leadership support. And I would like to say here that I am incredibly lucky to have such a supportive SLT. I know that senior leadership teams are different in different schools, and we all have a different experience, but I hope that throughout this presentation you're able to take something and use it to develop or to continue developing in your department. So I started at Outwood Academy Adwick in 2017. Before I actually started though in the September, I'd already spoken to my SLT about my plans for Musical Futures. Now luckily I'd had experience with Musical Futures prior to joining Outwood Academy Adwick. I'd developed a Musical Futures pedagogy at my previous school, so therefore I had experiences with Musical Futures that I could use as evidence-based. So I had numbers of uptake, I had evidence of engagement, I had evidence of results that worked from the Musical Futures. And I know that in some cases that won't be available to everybody, but there is plenty of evidence-based within Musical Futures that you can use. And I think the most important thing that I had was a plan. My plan was clear, it was thought out, and I knew it well. They couldn't really argue with it. They knew how passionate I was and how engaged I was, and they could tell that I knew where I wanted to take the department. So I had a vision. This is a picture of my classroom in the summer before I started in the September. When I visited in the summer, I knew straight away that there were changes that I wanted to make to this classroom in order to make it appropriate for the way that I was going to teach music in this Musical Futures pedagogy. I wanted to remove the tables from the room, and I wanted to approach this with senior leadership in the correct way. I wanted to show them that I'd thought about it and that I had all my bases covered. I wanted them to know that when we were doing written work, I had a plan. I wanted them to know that certain policies that they have in across teaching and learning, I would be able to still do without the tables, without the written space. And so when I presented this idea to senior leadership, they were fine. And I think it was because I had that clear plan and it was evidence-based and I had all my bases covered. This was another room in the department when I joined in September 2017, and this was the Max Suite. This is the first lesson with Year 9 in the first week back in September, and you can see that the room has changed quite significantly. I've now created a space that is much more appropriate for making music using a Musical Futures pedagogy, and I was happy with the space that I had created. It meant that students became more engaged. They found that they were able to make music more appropriately. Now, I always hear comments from teachers saying, well, I can't create a space like that because I don't have enough ukuleles, or I don't have enough basses, or I don't have enough of this or that. Don't worry about that. Use what you can. You've got to start somewhere. So here I went into the store cupboard and I just pulled out as much as I could and I used it. And the students didn't mind. They were just happy that they were making music. I invited SLT in. They could see what the students were doing. They could see the students were engaged. They could see the changes that were happening. And because of that, that trust that I've spoken about was further developed. And it's that saying, isn't it? If you build it, the students will come, and they absolutely did. The progress that was happening in lessons was amazing, and senior leadership team couldn't argue with that. They couldn't argue with the student engagement. They couldn't argue with the progress because they were seeing it. They were seeing it firsthand. They were seeing it happen, and it was all about the students. Everything that I did was all about making it better for those students and giving them a real life music making experience. And that really helped me. I get asked a lot about how I've tackled marking and assessment. And in the September, I always wanted to bring in Showbie. Now, I'm sure lots of you will have heard about Showbie. And the reason I wanted Showbie was because I was able to document performances whilst being able to provide verbal feedback. And I found that was better for me because I was able to be more personal within my verbal feedback, and I was able to be loads more specific, and it was recorded so students could always go back to it. Now, in order for me to present Showbie to my SLT, I wanted to make sure that I had a clear plan and I had my evidence based. So I already had some evidence from my previous school, but I wanted to make it personal, specific to the academy that I was part of. So I did do a little bit of experimenting for a couple of months using Showbie, but in order to sort of develop a portfolio that I could present to senior leaders. So I had my evidence, but I also knew the pros and cons to what I was trying to present, and I had my contingencies. I had all my bases covered. I had parts of the policy and where I would be able to evidence that, so that SLT felt comfortable, but also felt that they could place trust in the system that I was trying to develop. I absolutely believed in what I was doing, and I knew that it would be better for the students. It was more subject appropriate, it was going to allow students to progress, etc., etc. And I was able to present that because I had my evidence and because I had a clear plan. The growing engagement in my subject and the need to develop it further, because what I wanted to do was create more opportunities for students and needed a bigger space, and SLT absolutely agreed with that. For example, I wanted to create more opportunities for boys in particular to drum, because I knew that that was what engaged them, and therefore that's where I could progress with those students. So I needed a bigger space, and as I mentioned before, we had a Mac suite, but the Macs were out of date and therefore the space wasn't being used. So I had a clear plan of what I wanted to do. I had some evidence base that actually a bigger space will allow me to do this, and this is the impact that it will have. And this was the Mac suite when we came back after Christmas. So all the desks had been removed, the Macs had been donated to another academy, and I was able to start now developing a space that was much more appropriate for the students. And as I said to you earlier, I brought senior leaders in. I made sure that they were there to document, to see what was happening, to see the student engagement. A quote from one of our vice principals: "It was truly remarkable to hear the different genres of music. It makes you feel good whenever you walk into the room, and there is always a buzz for learning. Students are proud to show you what they have done, and I love to stop by, take photos, videos, and give out praise to our wonderful young people and their fantastic teachers." So we were creating this beautiful space. And I always knew that I wanted a place in which performance could be highlighted. I've always thought that when you actually sort of centre stage a performance, it sounds better than when you don't. As more and more senior leaders have talked to me about what I was doing and my development and how I wanted it to sound, I went and I spoke to them about a stage. Again, I had evidence from a previous place that I'd worked. I'd built a stage there. I also went to visit Fred Longworth in Wigan, and they have a stage, so I took pictures, I'd got information. I spoke to our design technology technician as well, and spoke to him about costings, and I brought him up and asked would it be possible. So I did all my homework before I actually approached this idea of stage. I had pros, I had cons, I had evidence base, I was passionate, I was energetic about it. And then I went and sort of presented this idea of a stage to my head teacher at the time. I went with costings and how that costing would then impact student learning, and how actually it would feed into their BTEC examinations. So I made sure it was about the students, and that I was passionate, and that I could see it working, and that I had this plan. And she happily agreed, and I think she agreed because of everything that I've said before about that enthusiasm, that passion, but that she trusted where I was going because she could see that I've thought it through. This year we've installed a brand new iMac suite, each with a DJ deck and the appropriate software and hardware for the BTEC courses. Top tips would be relentless. You know what's best for your classroom and for your subject, so trust in yourself. Make sure you've got that evidence, and make sure you've thought about all the different bases. Invite SLT in and make them a part of it. Make them excited about what is happening in your classroom. Put students first. If students are first, then your decisions will be right. Have contingency plans in case you're told no. Don't put any barriers up. So if you're wanting to create a bigger space, don't think, well, I haven't got guitar, so I can't do it. Just use anything and everything that you can. Be passionate and make every lesson exciting. Taking the time out to watch this. If you want to contact me to ask me any questions, it's absolutely fine. My email is there. Thank you again. Bye.